FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's Kerry, Lutz, and we got an election coming up, and you might have your opinion, I have mine, but who's going to be better off for you financially? There's so many candidates. They're spewing out so many promises, assurances, and who can tell what's going to happen? And there's so much going on in the international stage and so many uncertainties that we just don't know what's going to happen. But that won't stop us from taking a guess at it, taking a stab at it. And we've got Ross K. Urken over from the street.com to help us speculate on what's going to happen here. Ross, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
Always a pleasure. So what's your feeling here as far as Democrat, Republican, who's going to be better for your checkbook here?
Well, it's really early days, obviously, and we love to play this horse race leading up to 2016. So we have new people entering the fray in what seems like every week. But I think voters are, especially in this election, going to vote with their wallets. We've seen record levels of debt, student loan debt. Average household has $15,000 of credit card debt. People, both rich and poor, are worried about taxes. So what we did on mainstreet.com, the Street's personal finance site, is kind of handicapped each candidate. And, on the Democratic side, obviously we have Hillary Clinton as the front runner, as opposed to Elizabeth Warren, whose brainchild, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, would certainly sit well with most Americans. But Clinton, is center-left economically. Taxes are kind of the biggest takeaway for her platform. She wants to promote profit sharing for middle-class workers and wants to expand the earned income tax credit. Whether or not she could achieve these goals is always the issue when you're talking about politics. People make promises, people have ideas. Whether Congress can help to enact that is another story. Something else, we were focused on related to Clinton is capital gains taxes. The IRS, is the biggest tool in Clinton's equality arsenal, and she wants to start taxing investment income. A lot of the middle class is invested in the market. We've seen huge returns. People's 401ks, people's IRAs, people just kind of investing money in their future. This isn't necessarily day traders. So I think people need to take a close look at Clinton's capital gains tax ideas. But if you look on the Republican side, we have, it's almost like deja vu, Jeb Bush. Clinton Bush dynasties appearing in American politics. So, the big picture with him is would it be a huge return to supply side tax theory, and that just means a lot of heavy cuts to the top. So certainly going to be beneficial to wealthy voters. I think that lots of other people are looking at Scott Walker, who came into hot water on the Republican side for putting the kibosh on the labor disputes out in Wisconsin, the state he's governor of. We had Mike Huckabee enter the fray, trying to play a kind of folksy Arkansas man and not a wealthy kind of executive and TV host. There's a lot of kind of middle-class posturing we see in a candidate as he tries to relate to the middle ground of Americans' wallets. And of course, we can't forget Carly Fiorina, the ex-HP CEO, who famously fired some 30,000 people during her tenure at the company. So a lot of people are thinking about job security and job confidence, and certainly want to take a leader who not only has kind of a leadership acumen, but also a heart.
Well, Ross, when you're looking at what they're going to do for the economy, you can't underplay the impact of Obamacare. There are so many of you out there who are incensed, even to this day, about the adverse effects of Obamacare. So many of you paying double, triple for health care for inferior products. And the Republicans seem to have perhaps backed off, some of them, certainly the mainstream, but the candidates have not backed off from it. They're still emphatically opposed to it. They're still making noises to repeal it. And if we could go back to the old system or come up with a new system that would somehow mitigate the effects of Obamacare, that could certainly have an appeal to many voters out there. Don't you think so?
Kerry, I think you're 100% correct. A lot of people have expressed displeasure with Obamacare as it's been executed, and I think the two Republican candidates who are most opposed to it are Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush. So, whether we'll see Jebsurance or, an old system really depends. But I think Ted Cruz, among other things, he wants a flat tax. He wants kind of to, in a sense, do away with the IRS, but he's really campaigning on this Obamacare repeal. And, there have been so-called Republican versions of Obamacare, but I don't think there has been a clear distillation of what a candidate's healthcare proposal would look like. But I'm sure, that will materialize as the primaries approach and as, the campaigns continue.
And coming out against Obamacare is a sure winner for any candidate, for certain, because it's been so poorly executed. It's causing physicians to flee the practice of medicine, and it's cost millions of people their individual policies. It's been a net negative in the electoral.
Sure. I mean, that's
politics.
Certainly an opinion, and I think voters will weigh in. Certainly, the Democratic candidates are still going to push Obamacare, and there is a portion of the population that has benefited. But I agree that it has really taken a lot of flack. People are confused when they see higher bills than expected on medical expenses, and the whole rollout, we forget, was quite fraught. So people are looking for a change, and whether it's Marco Rubio who can bring that, or Scott Walker, or whether someone like a Bernie Sanders, who's kind of a way left-wing Vermonter. It will be interesting to see the various proposals, because I think forget taxes, forget the economy at large and employment. This healthcare issue is kind of a vital need for our ever aging population, and as people have longer retirements and have more health issues as they live longer, it's something that people need to be concerned about, and it certainly is affecting their bottom line. So the person who I think can create one of the better plans for an alteration or an antidote to the policy, I think will be in a beneficial position.
Yeah, and everybody seems to be avoiding it really like the plague so far. That's what's really disturbing to me, and I think to many voters, is that it's almost a non-issue so far. But I think that's really going to change. At least I hope it's going to change, because the Republicans' strategy so far, I think, is a loser to avoid it, because they got to come up with something right? They got to come up with some alternative, because to just run against Obamacare isn't going to work. That's a loser.
Right. People want concrete, you know, concrete plans in effect that they can kind of attach themselves to. And I think with Jeb Bush in particular, he's looking at kind of a catastrophic coverage plan instead of the ACA, Obamacare. And then I think if you're looking at Bernie Sanders, he's maybe a little more inclined to support a single-payer healthcare reform. So, people have ideas, but nothing has been spelled out. And I think, on their websites and on their as part of their stump speeches, these candidates are going to continue to spell out their projections.
Yeah, and healthcare, especially after Obamacare, taken up an ever larger share of disposable income, and to some extent, that's got to be because let's face it, aging population, baby boomers theoretically retiring at the rate of 10,000 per day. Although you have to wonder when you see the labor statistics, and the biggest growing part of the labor force is 55 and up, of which I'm a part of. And that gets me to the next part, is retirement and the instability of Social Security and pension funds, both public and private. And I think that's a sleeper issue here that's kind of been addressed by a few of the candidates, but not really. And it's really a huge issue to the boomers, which is, a dominant part of the electorate.
Absolutely. What's interesting to me is that both the baby boomers and the younger portion of millennials, I'm talking about those like 18 to 24, make up 1/3 of the population. And they're the ones, about 107 million people total. And I think they're the ones that are really going to sway the election here, because they're both the most challenged. The baby boomers, don't know whether they're going to drop dead while on the job at 90 years old because they can't afford to retire. And the students, the younger millennials are struggling with student loan debt and unable to grow up, unable to buy real estate or cars. And I think the people who can best lay out a strategy for them are going to appeal to the voters. So, if you think of, Martin O'Malley, during his governorship of Maryland, was a big proponent of Obama income-based repayment, which is basically allowing people to pay back student loans according to the amount of money they make. And also, Bernie Sanders has been a big advocate for that sort of thing. Jeb Bush has advocated for massive open online courses, what they call MOOCs, as a way of making college less expensive. But the youth population doesn't vote as much as a lot of the retirees, baby boomers, and I think coming up with a way to change taxes or secure retirement based on fiduciary standards, and not allowing companies to erode pension plans, it really will be beneficial. But I think at this point, no one, and it's very, I think, striking that you ask about it, because no one has made a clear retirement strategy. We've even heard Marco Rubio and Rand Paul talking about net neutrality and various tech issues. And I think Rand Paul was wearing a "Don't Drone Me" brochure to kind of appeal to the young voters. But, what about the people who are concerned about retiring and having a secure retirement? I think that, those people need to be spoken to, and a plan needs to be put in place.
Oh, it's a potential crisis. And hey, I'm down here in Florida, and when you see somebody in their late 70s working in a cash register in a convenience store, in a gas station, it really does break your heart, Ross, because granted, perhaps they didn't save like they should have, but you know that there's millions more like them out there. And hey, maybe they made some mistakes, but then you look at a place like Chile where they've privatized their retirement system, and they've had thus far for over a generation, they've had some amazing results. And you think that Bush 43 attempted to do this over, God, it's basically over 12 years ago. If we had adopted at least part of the system that he was espousing, we wouldn't be in this position now. Probably the economy would be better off than it is now. And, you have to wonder, what have we been doing the past generation? It's really distressing.
I agree. The retirement crisis in this country is real, and people aren't saving enough. They're not saving early enough, and there aren't the same government plans in place and buffers and support systems, Social Security included, that would help these people through their golden years typically. So, I think it's time for candidates to address this issue. We do hear a lot about the student loan crisis, and we don't so much hear about the retirement crisis, and why that is, whether it's a less sexy topic or whether the media fixation on student loan debt is something that has just distracted from the retirement debate. Might be a possible explanation, but that said, I think at the end of the day, this is the younger millennials and the baby boomers are making up 1/3 of the population, and obviously, a greater portion of the voting public, the electorate. So we'll see who spells out a plan first, and we'll cover in kind.
Yeah, well, we got to start getting serious about it now. Thing is, the longer you put these things off, the worse the problem gets, just like everything else that we put off, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, and student loan reform, everything else. In fact, the situation with student loan reform is getting worse because as you loosen up the standards, allow people to borrow more and more, and all that, this situation just become another bubble. And unfortunately, with bubbles, what happens. So, getting back to the initial premise of our conversation. So, as far as candidates being plus or minus for your pocketbook, what other issues do you think are going to play on Main Street?
I think that, if we just review, we have taxes, we have student loan debt, we have Social Security, that people are going to keep an eye on. I think maybe Martin O'Malley, who's not really a serious candidate on the Democratic side, might address that. But then we have, the capital gains tax that Clinton is addressing. I think, those, and then healthcare, those are really the main issues at play. People who are keeping an eye on everything these candidates say are also keeping a hand on their wallets. They, want to see that the politics are aligned. But if we think of someone, I don't know, like a Chris Christie, who also I don't think is a very serious candidate at this point. on the Republican side, he certainly isn't going to outdo, let's say, Jeb Bush. Rand Paul has much more momentum at this point. But, someone who has mass appeal to the middle class, but also, kind of a working Jersey Bruce Springsteen sort of element, but also someone who has tax policies in place that help wealthier investors, might be something to consider. Also, if you just think overall credit, how people have performed in their states or, in their districts. Christie has, New Jersey's credit rating has been downgraded 8 times since he took office. And I think people want to operate in a country and an economy that, is rated well, where lending is viable, because that often is kind of the lifeblood of the economy, pumping it into small businesses and real estate. I think people maybe in this election are, because we were far enough removed from the Great Recession, that people are still, though, feeling the aftershocks. They're going to vote along party lines as always, but they're certainly considering the money element at the forefront of their minds.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think Scott Walker, his union busting initiatives have basically really put the brake on taxes in Wisconsin and enabled a lot of union excesses to be rolled back in that state. And he won 3 elections in a row. Now the excesses of his political opponents are being exposed in the, I don't want to get into the whole inside baseball, but a lot of the excesses are being exposed. I think the overall Wisconsin's done pretty well in the aftermath of the Great Recession. I think he's got a pretty good record by comparison. Interesting thing about Jeb Bush, right after he gets done being governor of Florida, Great Recession comes, really destroys the Florida real estate market. I mean, just decimates it. But his successor deals with it. Really, he's disliked by most of the state, but he manages to get reelected. Now Florida is in the midst of another real estate boom, economically performing extremely well by comparison to the rest of the states. Population growth, now the 3rd most populous state in the country. So, in retrospect, his record, not so bad, actually. So he might have a better shot economically looking at things. Anyway, we got to run. Just tell us where we find your work again, Ross.
So you can find it at thestreet.com and mainstreet.com for more.
All right. And as always, you find links in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Remember, our webinar is coming up on May 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Just check the site. You find the graphic. Just click it, and that'll take you right to the free sign-up sheet. And Ross, always a pleasure, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you so much.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.